just wanted to meet you. I'm Delanne. I know I probably didn't even introduce myself. I apologize. Delanne Elliott Midland. I am the president and CEO of the End to Brain Cancer Initiative. And we've actually been around for almost 22 years, believe it or not. But what we're really interested in today is we're really interested in your patient story and your caregiving story. So,
well, I'm the patient. She's the caregiver.
hi, Neil, the patient.
First of all, I have to say, I wouldn't be here today without Dawn. She saved my life. She's my caregiver, and she is fastidious to the point where it could drive you crazy. But she saved my life financially because the paperwork involved was okay, give us dates, times of the doctors you saw, the prescriptions that were, the procedures you had, the dates, the times, the procedures of those, the dates and times of those procedures. What medications are you on? What medications did you take? What protocols were, and she had, and then of course it was kind of humorous where it says, and they gave you a space this big, and it said, use more paper if required.
Yeah.
We gave him
we drowned them in paperwork.
In small little type, 16 pages of here's the dates, the times, the people, the hospitals, the procedures, the nurses, the prescriptions. 16 pages. We've told our story to our church. We've told our story to a couple of other people. A couple of other people with cancer have called us. So we have dedicated ourselves to sharing our story to whoever it may help.
Thank you. And thank you for doing that because it really does help, right? It really does help others.
About 3 years ago, in 2021, we lived just outside of Washington, D.C., about 35 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And it was during that time we were going through COVID that everybody could work from home. And at that point, I was starting to wrap up my my career. I was at the tail end of my career. I'm a couple of years older than Dawn, and I was gonna work from home, and home could be anywhere. It could be outside of DC, or it could be down in Florida. So we decided as a couple that it would be nice to live in Florida. And then her brother, who's got a farm out here in Winchester, said, well, why don't you come live with me? And I thought, this is perfect. What I could do is I could work from home out on in the farmhouse. We wouldn't have a mortgage. We could bank a lot of money, and then we would become snowbirds. We could have the best of all the worlds. We could get out of Dodge in the wintertime, get down to Florida. And then when it starts heating up down there and spring is over, we come up to Virginia, and he's got the farm that I could do my gardening, and we could raise chickens, and we could have really, like I said, the best of all worlds. So we moved out. We took him up on his invitation. We moved out to his farmhouse, and we all lived. There's three of us, and we're all in our 60s now. And we the kids are grown, so he's a confirmed bachelor, so it was easy. So I'm working a garden, a very large garden, back in 2021, and I noticed that I was developing a limp.
Oh,
I had a limp on my left side, and I'm trying to hide it from Dawn, and I'm not figuring, and I'm not good at that, but I after a couple of weeks, I went to her and I said, I don't want you to be alarmed, but I've noticed that I'm dragging my left foot. I can't seem to, when I sit in the car, in the driver's seat, I have to physically lift my leg into the car, my left leg that's dragging on the pavement. I got to lift it into the car and close the door. And she said, well, I've noticed something's a little off, but okay. And then later, it wasn't too much later, that I didn't know it, but I had lost the peripheral vision on the left side of my body. where I was driving and we came up to a busy intersection. I looked left, I looked right, everything's clear. I looked left again,
Oh,
and I pull out right in front of a speeding car,
wow.
and we almost got into a wreck, but we didn't. And at that moment, Dawn says, "You know, I think we should go to the hospital. You know, didn't you see that car?" And I said, "No, I did not see that car." And my brother-in-law was in the car, and he says, "Well, we saw it. I saw it." Um, and I said, "No." And so we continued on to the restaurant we were going to. Well, you know, who has time to go to the hospital? Let's eat, you know. And so she's noticing, she's looking at me, and she says, "You know, the whole meal, I have not seen you use your left hand once." And I said, "Well, that's just silly. Here, look." And I picked up my drink with my left hand and I dropped it all over the table. And I said, "Well, that's odd." And I'm still in denial. No, no, no. I'm going to go on with my life tonight. I got plans. And an hour or so later, I realized, you know, I have no energy. I feel awful. And I called up Dawn and I said, "I'm going to come home and I'd like to go to the hospital." And she says, "You stay where you're put. You stay put. We're on our way. We're going to pick you up, and I'm bringing a driver to drive the car home. We're going to go to the hospital." So we go to the hospital that night. And I thought maybe it was a stroke, you know, because it was left side, left side, left side. I couldn't see left. I was dragging my left foot. You know, I couldn't pick things up with my left hand. So maybe it was a stroke. So we went into the ER and I said, I think I may be having a stroke. Well, they immediately whisk you into the back. They don't, yep, there's no hesitation. If you say I'm having a heart attack or I'm having a stroke, those two things get you right into the fast lane. So we went back and doctor said, okay, I think we need to get a CAT scan. Now, I may remember things a little bit differently, and I'm going to ask Dawn to jump in if I get some facts wrong because she does remember a lot better than I do. My brain was affected by the cancer, and
I'm
so
just going to
sometimes
say women often remember things differently than men. It's okay.
right, right, and so a little while later after the CAT scan, um, the doctor comes in and says, "You're not having a stroke, but we did pick up two masses in your brain." And my whole world just collapsed. It just, wait. And I said, can you say that again? And so while I'm stunned, she's already got her iPad out and is researching cancer groups, cancers, types of cancer treatments. And the one thing we were told over and over and over again, and when people who have cancer call us, we say the same thing: don't wait, act immediately, don't take no. If they say we can't, then find somebody who says we can. And the other not mistake, but the other advice we give people is don't go to your local hospital. If you've got, and I had a very rare form of cancer. What is it? 1 in 1,500 people in the country every year have this form of cancer. And so my local hospital, they're going to Dr. Google about this cancer, and they don't know anything about it. And so she's already on the groups reading from people who say if your doctor suggests chemotherapy, that's a good step. That's a good step. If he's suggesting radiation or steroids, run, don't walk away from that doctor. That's not the doctor you want. Get yourself to people who that's all they do. So the next day, we had scheduled a biopsy with a brain surgeon locally at that hospital that was very reputable. We met with him, and he says, "This is what I'm going to do," you know, and he was very calming. You know, "I've done this thousands of times. We're going to just drill a small little hole. We're going to take a sample. I'm going to pathologically send it out for pathology to UVA because they've got an atomic DNA analyzer, and we're gonna keep the other sample ourselves, and we have an in-house lab, so we'll know right away. And now this was at the very last week of March, and so the and we talked about dates, so I wouldn't get them wrong. On March 31st, I had the biopsy.
Yep.
Yes, and then no, March 30th.
31st.
31st, I had the biopsy, and on April 1st, the next day, he called me. The doctor called me, and he was saying this could take 5 days, and April 1st was a Friday, and he called and he said, I didn't want you to wait the weekend. I want you to know that it's not glioblastoma, glioblastoma. It's lymphoma, and that is a good thing. He says, but again, this is a cancer you can't wait on. Get help immediately. So our nearest cancer center, I mean, there's major ones that we can all think of. There's Dana-Farber in Boston. There's Sloan Kettering in New York. There's Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. There's Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and down in Jacksonville, Florida. Dawn had already reached Sloan Kettering. And Dawn has a good experience about a woman who was in Italy who was on the Facebook group.
As it turned out, there was a woman in the Facebook group, which you'll hear us reference a lot, because that was one of the first things that within the first 5 days of him being diagnosed, I found that Facebook group, which is strictly CNS lymphoma, primary and secondary friendship and support group. And what Neil was referring to, there was a woman that saw my post and called me from Italy through like Facebook Messenger. She kept trying to reach me, and for some reason I couldn't pick up the call. It kept getting dropped, and finally she just started texting me and said, she's originally, they live in Long Island, but they have a place in Italy, so she was there on vacation. Her husband has been battling this disease and has relapsed multiple times. She was amazing and had I don't know if should we mention doctors' names specifically? Is that okay? Okay, so she put us in touch with Christian Gomez, who is probably one of the foremost CNS lymphoma specialists in the country. And she says, I'm going to reach out to him personally and make sure that you get in there. And as it turns out, Neil's sister and her husband, they live in the Bronx. So they had already reached out to us at the very beginning of all this and said, if you end up at Memorial Sloan Kettering, you have a place to stay. So we knew that. We did a Zoom meeting, much like this, with him and one of the people on his team.
He was very reassuring.
Yep, he was. He said, everything looks good. We can treat you. How quickly can you get here? And I believe it was 2 days later, we were in New York City. And so Neil's first treatment was on Easter weekend, which happened to be his birthday. His birthday and Easter coincided. So his first treatment was his 64th birthday. He was in the hospital.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said Neil started treatment. I wanted to ask what the treatment is that you started.
So there is no protocol yet. There's no established protocol for CNS lymphoma.
So no standard.
They basically they go with what has worked best in the past historically. He began his treatment, which is 8 rounds of high-dose methotrexate. He did a chemotherapy cocktail that was known as RMPV. So it's rituximab, methotrexate,
Ugh.
um, I want to say procarbazine, I could be wrong,
Yep.
and vincristine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That
Good
was his
job,
cocktail.
Nancy.
And it was because it had to pass the blood-brain barrier, it was very potent. And they told me that. They said you may be very ill from this because it has to be powerful enough to go past the blood-brain barrier.
And well, technically, the methotrexate usually is well tolerated. It's been around forever. It's a common chemotherapy used for breast cancer, I understand, but not in this potency. So every one of his treatments had to be inpatient because he couldn't be released from the hospital until his blood work came back that the methotrexate had cleared his system. Typically, for most patients, that will take 4 to 5 days. Some people faster, some people longer. There's some people that are in the hospital for 10 days.
Really?
And then you repeat this every 2 weeks. The first doctor that we saw here in Winchester that did the brain biopsy, he said, looking at the scans initially, he said it's either glioblastoma or lymphoma. He recognized right away, which is amazing because this is misdiagnosed so often. And the fact that he saw that, and immediately the day that he looked at Neil's CAT scan and then the MRIs said, I really hope it's not glioblastoma. I mean, I remember him saying that.
Yeah, he said.
And you don't want glioblastoma. And so I think that's what Dr. Gromas meant. It's
Yeah.
most of the time it responds very well to treatment. But there are people that don't tolerate the methotrexate. It's pretty harsh on the kidney, the liver, so some people can't tolerate 8 treatments of that.
Right.
And,
So hence the blood work.
and like I said, we leaned heavily on prayer, but took the professional medical advice route as well. You take the humans, when you find yourself in a sinking boat, you get in a lifeboat and you pray to God, but you row towards shore. So we were praying to God, but we were following medical advice. So, right, so we decided that we were going to rely on the medical field, and we're going to rely on our church family as well. My sister, who's very, very talented and very well educated, she dug in and found PALS. You spell it PALS, which is a nonprofit group that has a collection of airplane pilots and airplanes, and they would fly cancer patients and their caregiver. If it was more than a 2 hour journey, they would fly them free of charge from one airport to another, and they would pay for the ground transportation once you landed. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that we had laid out in front of us after we decided to do this was just we were always amazed.
Well, we just figured we were in this for the long haul, this long drive, and we were dreading it. And unbeknownst to us, she was doing this research. PAL stands for Patient Airlift Services. And we made a phone call and filled out some paperwork. And so basically it's compassionate flights for people with either terminal or, some sort of a terrible illness that we couldn't take a commercial airline flight because of his immune deficiency. And we were still in COVID. So getting on a commercial flight, there was just not something we could do.
Right.
And so that was just amazing because we flew from the local regional airport here in Winchester directly to Westchester, New York. And Uber picked us up there and took us either to his sister's house or directly to the hospital, depending what his appointment schedule was. And then did the same coming home. And these are all people, volunteers that are that offer their airplane, the fuel, the time that they, fly. It's just amazing. And they do this, there's several PALs across the nation. And I don't know how we would have gotten through that.
But we realized that we couldn't keep paying for a hotel in Manhattan, and we couldn't keep putting pals on a string with a last minute cancellation. So we decided it was time to perhaps transfer everything over to Johns Hopkins. Now, Johns Hopkins, the head on, well, not head, but the oncologist
Neuro-oncologist.
whose specialty is identical to the one in New York, to Dr. Gomez, turns out to be a German fellow who travels the country with Dr. Gomez,
Oh, wow.
doing working on the same papers, the same procedures. He understood the protocols.
They're
He
friends.
he said, I reviewed everything they've done in Sloan Kettering. It's exactly what we would do, and we'll just pick up where they left off.
He says, I'm going to text him right now. So,
Well, that is phenomenal.
yeah,
May I ask you the name of that doctor?
that he pronounces his first name Matthias, Matthias, Holdhoff, Holdhoff.
At John Hopkins.
And he would be the counterpart to Dr. Gomez at and he, when we took, like I said, we went to and so we finished the 5th treatment. I'm sorry. So the 5th treatment was the last treatment in New York. So we still had 6, 7, and 8 to go. Plus, Dr. Gomez had recommended when Neil finishes this treatment that he have a stem cell transplant. So we knew that was on the horizon. And we had already talked about preferring to have, because we knew that with the stem cell transplant, we were going to have to relocate to New York for about 5 to 6 weeks. We were not looking forward to that. So we were hoping to transfer to Baltimore for the stem cell transplant anyway. So this just moved the timeline up. So we had an extra week between treatment. There was a little lag in getting everything transferred over, but it was a real seamless transition. It's just under a 2-hour drive for us. And the nice thing about Hopkins is they have housing for patients. If you're going to be there for more than 3 days with tests or procedures, or, if you're going to be admitted, you can stay in this housing. It's very dorm-like, but it became my home away from home. So he was having periodic MRIs, so we were seeing that the tumors were shrinking.
Awesome.
So we knew that the treatment was working.
So I have to ask a question. The treatments. So we talked a little bit about the big words, right?
Yeah.
The drugs, the big drugs.
Right.
Is the treatment that you're on, is it a clinical trial?
No.
So
No. Rituximab, that's a immunotherapy drug. That's probably one of the newer ones that I wouldn't say it's a clinical trial, but it seems to be something that's been getting more attention lately. It basically attaches itself.
How do you spell that?
The way I heard it explained was I would have an infusion the day before. In this infusion, they said, think of it as little flags, and then it finds a lymphoma cell and puts a little marker on that lymphoma cell. And then the next day, we're giving you a separate drug that is a killing drug, but will only kill things that have been marked with a marker.
That's
and
awesome.
So
Awesome.
it was great.
Awesome.
And then I still remember the day, again, after we turned to God and we said, we're going to put our faith in God, but our hands in the hands of the doctors. Um, I still remember everything being a manageable step, and of course I'm sicker than a dog, and I hear things like, you're gonna have an MRI. Oh, okay, we're gonna do a CAT scan. Oh, we're gonna do blood work every day. So I always felt like I was just a rag doll being wheeled around from procedure to procedure, procedure to procedure. And then one day he says, "You're gonna have an MRI. I want to check the brain." And it was always neat that we'd have the MRI in the morning at like 10 in the morning, but we'd have the consult at 2 in the afternoon because he had the results. Everything was done right there. And I still remember being in his office, and he says, "Well, it looks like you're NED." And I said, "NED?" He goes, "No evidence of disease." And I just, the tears were rolling down my cheeks, and he goes, "Neil, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And I says, "Are you kidding me? There's nothing wrong. I'm the happiest I've ever been. How can you? Uh, gosh, I can't tell you how that felt."
Yeah. It's
Doc,
and that
Doc,
was right after that was after his 7th treatment.
And
So we knew he
he's
still had,
he
we're
says,
gonna do one more.
yeah,
We're
he
still
goes,
gonna do it.
"We're still gonna do one more, but let's start talking about the stem cell transplant." And I said to the doctor, do I have to have this?" He goes, "No, you don't have to." He says, "But how'd you like to go through chemo all over again?"
Yeah.
And I said, "What?" He goes, "You relapse, you got to go through it all over again to get back to where we are right now to get a transplant."
And they're careful to say that he's not cured. But the stem cell transplant gives him the best shot at the long-term remission. And the best part about that is the longer he can stay in remission, the more treatment options, hopefully, there would be if it ever comes
right,
back.
right. And that's because, as we know, right, there's research going on all the time.
Right. It's interesting because the Facebook group that we belong to, there are people from all over the world in
Yeah.
that group.
Yes.
And new people join daily.
Which is
And
one.
they are either patients or family members. And I think the hardest thing, I'm on it daily. Neil, I don't think ever goes in it. He kind of doesn't want to
I don't,
just be that, but I'm in there all the time. I like to offer support and advice to other caregivers. And if there are patients that have questions that I can answer based on Neil's experience, I will chime in. But I think the hardest thing for me and the most frustrating thing is when someone can't find the treatment that Neil got.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
see that a lot in other countries, but we also see it in the US, and people that are, like I said, common misdiagnosis seems to be MS. I hear that a lot. And there are people that are misdiagnosed for months and months.
We hear this too.
Yeah.
That is one of my bigger takeaways last year when Dr. Thomas Letcher was speaking, was that misdiagnosis piece, which is huge and incredibly common.
or they prescribe a steroid and it suppresses it.
Right.
Right. The steroid, we found out later he never should have been put on steroids in the hospital when he was first diagnosed. As soon as they suspected lymphoma, the steroid should have been discontinued because it can give a false reading with the biopsy. It can make the biopsy almost impossible. So they want ideally the patient to not be on steroids prior to the biopsy. As soon as the biopsy is done, the steroids can be given, and that actually can improve symptoms. My heart goes out to anybody that gets this diagnosis, because the worst thing you can do is go on Google. And that was the first thing I did, because the information on the internet is so outdated regarding this disease. And
Mhm.
everything that you're going to find on the internet will tell you this is a death sentence.
Right.
We saw that from day one, that the prognosis is you're going to be dead in 2 months. You know, it's that bad. There's so much misinformation out there. And the only place I found hope, of course, through our prayer and our church and our faith, but the only place I found it was in this Facebook group where people, that was the first thing they said, get off Google.
Can
Don't
you
go on Google.
They are the real world warriors.
Yep.
living it, living
I
it,
mean, it's and
experiencing it?
everybody in there was so much positive stuff we were hearing, and success stories, and people that were living 10 years, 20 years with this disease. And we were like, wow, you're giving us hope, you know? And so then we just focused on getting him to where he needed to be. Oh my goodness, the transplant team at Johns Hopkins is amazing. And just absolutely amazing. And they not only take care of the patient, but they take care of the caregiver too. And I remember there was one day where I bent over wrong and I hurt my back. And so you literally have to get up every morning. This is post-transplant, get him up and going in a wheelchair over there for a 7 a.m. blood draw. You know, so at one point I bent over and picked up something and hurt my back. Well, I'm wheeling him in that morning and I must not have looked good. And one of the nurses, I said, you're going to have to help me with the wheelchair. I hurt my back. He goes, let me take Neil. So he took Neil back. He came out 5 minutes later and said, come on, I'm ready for you. In the little cubicle where Neil was already laying down getting his infusion, he had brought in one of their really nice chemo chairs and draped it with hot blankets. And he said, this is for you. He went out, he got me a big cup of ice water, and he goes, I'll be back for the foot massage in a few minutes. I just burst into tears. It was those little things that made such a, I mean, I said, you just have no idea what that just meant to me. And just to sink back in that chair with that hot blanket behind me, and he laid another one over my lap. I'm like,
And
you know,
and you have been the care partner and caregiver to Neil for quite a while. And when someone is so kind like
oh
that
my goodness.
and cares for the caregiver.
Now, you know, we've got this farm and we've got,
And as I was saying, the job ended. So did our financial plans that we had that had to take place in order for us to become snowbirds. So we decided that life on the farm is pretty darn good.
yeah, we just decided we're not going to Florida. This is where we are. We've got a new church and lots of friends, and we take ballroom dancing classes.
Oh, fun. Oh, very
Uh,
fun. Very fun.
Tomorrow night we're going to the annual formal gala, so we're gonna get all dressed up. And
2 days.
So you have your beautiful
Yes.
community there right where you live, you know.
right.
And your
Oh, yeah.
summers are pretty nice too, by the way.
They are.
The
We're
summers are great.
yeah. And we
I
have chickens now too, so we get fresh eggs every day. And you know, so it's,
I'm
you
getting
know,
ready to plant.
yep. So we've got a farm, and you know, I just go out every day and look up at that blue sky, and I'm like, this is really all we
Yeah.
need. This is it. And you know, we just pray every day that that remission lasts.
We went back. My last appointment at Johns Hopkins, we went up to see the care nurse that was really the daily care trooper. I don't know how she fits her wings underneath her gown every day, but those angel wings are there. And I walked in to see her, and there were all the patients in their cubicles
Oh,
with the curtains drawn, and I was one of them. And I kept saying, I want to tell everybody, you're going to get better. It's going to be great. It sucks now, but you will feel better. This is about as low as you're going to go. have hope. And I'm here to tell you, I feel so much better, and I made the right decisions. So I'm glad you're here. Um, who wants to be there? No one. But you're in the right place. And if you are diagnosed with lymphoma, uh, don't wait. Don't wait on it. Get care. Get professional care. Get care at a place that's all they do. That's all they do. You don't want a hospital with an obstetrics wing and an emergency room and ailments and all of that. Yes, Johns Hopkins has all that, but Johns Hopkins is so huge that they've got eye care, they've got cancer care, they've got health care. Yes, but the part of Johns Hopkins I was at, all they did was the cancer. And same with Sloan Kettering in New York. They had 3 locations in Manhattan, and all 3 were dedicated to cancer care, depending on what kind
That's
of
all they
cancer
do is,
what kind of cancer you were being treated for.
right.
Wonderful. And so how do you want, if someone has a question or wants to talk, how would you like them to contact you?
Contact Dawn,
Dawn?
and then Dawn will say, "There's a person reaching out that needs to talk."
I
And
would say email me.
yeah,
Yeah.
What is
and
that email address?
My email address is D.E. Manausah, which is our last name, spelled MANAUSA @gmail.com. And if you just put CNS lymphoma in the subject line, that way it'll stand out to me right away.
And I want to say thank you, truthfully, to each of you for sharing your story and also sharing frankly, your experience, which has now brought wisdom, and also hope. And so thank you. You both have just been so lovely to chat with this afternoon. So thank you so much.